So thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon for you panel meeting. I am Shannon Mackay. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Development Planning, the Urban team. I'm hosting this meeting. However, Vince is and will be the chair throughout the meeting. Just a couple of quick notes. In addition to the panel members today, we have the applicant team, city staff members, and members of the public and media observing this meeting. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. And just a reminder, if you can, keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. Just like helps with the background noise throughout the meeting. And Vince, I'll turn it over to you on that note.
Okay, good afternoon, welcome to all. Ken, are there any changes to the agenda today?
No changes today.
Okay, any declarations of interest from the panel members?
Hi, it's James. I'm declaring an interest in regards to this matter as I'm retained as the planning consultant.
James, you're sitting in. Okay, got it. First item today is a mixed-use development at 11 Robert Street. Lead planner in the file was Jennifer Allen. And good afternoon, Jennifer.
Good afternoon. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay.
Are you able to see that? Put it in slides. Okay.
Yes, we are, Jen.
Perfect. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Allen, and I'm the planner associated with this file. So the proposal is for a mixed-use 6-story building comprised of ground floor commercial and 28 residential units on the upper floors. So the site is located on the north side of Robert Street between James Street North and Houston Street North. So this is a photo of the site looking from Robert Street looking east. So you can see the adjacent single detached dwellings to the east and the mixed-use building to the west of the site, which is part of the James Street North Cultural Heritage Landscape. And then this is another photo of the site looking west on Robert Street. And you can see that the armory is across the street from the subject property. And then this is another photo showing the single detached dwellings adjacent to the property and the armory across the street. And I'll note that the existing site contains a 1-story commercial building that will be replaced by the proposed development. So this is the proposed development, the south facade. So looking north on Robert Street. And then this is the north facade looking north. And then the east facade and the west facade. And you can see the James Street North Cultural Heritage Landscape is blocking some of what you can see of the building. So the property is identified as Downtown Urban Growth Center on Schedule E of the official plan, and it is designated as mixed-use medium density on Schedule E1. So in the downtown urban growth area, it's the preeminent node of in Hamilton due to its scale, density, and range of uses. So it's planned for a range of uses to function in that role. Yep. And then the mixed-use medium density designation intends to provide a range of commercial uses and residential uses. And then it wants to ensure continued vibrancy in the pedestrian realm. And yeah, the predominant built form in this designation would be mid-rise and low-rise buildings with, and the intent is to have a mixed-use building with commercial at grade. So, and then some urban design policies that apply to this proposal is to respect the character, development patterns, built form, and landscapes. To promote quality design consistent with the surrounding environment, which respects and reflects the design of the surrounding heritage buildings. New development on pedestrian-focused streets shall enhance pedestrian comfort and street activity. Development should complement the existing massing patterns, rhythm, character, color of the surrounding context. And then buildings should generally be situated close to and oriented to the street. So the subject property is within the downtown Hamilton secondary plan, and it is designated downtown mixed use, pedestrian focused. And then the maximum building height it's designated as low rise 2, which allows for up to 6 stories. And then just to note that the property is adjacent to the James Street North Cultural Heritage Landscape. So the major policy themes and urban design policies that apply are that the height, massing, scale, and arrangement of the buildings and structures should be compatible with the adjacent development and sympathetic to the character and heritage of the neighborhood. Development should be compatible with the adjacent land uses, including matters such as shadowing, grading, overlook, noise, lighting, traffic, and other impacts. Pedestrian-focused streets are intended to create a comfortable, active, and visually stimulating walking environment, and they should maintain a complete street wall and provide an uninterrupted building line at the street level through infill development. The ground floor should clearly articulated in the massing of the facade, substantially glazed with generous floor-to-floor heights and designed to accommodate signage. And so then the subject property is currently zoned under zoning bylaw number 6593, and it is designated, or it is zoned H, community shopping and commercial district. But it should be noted that the property is intended to be changed to downtown prime residential streets D2 under 05200, and this will be completed by way of a housekeeping amendment. So the H district permits commercial uses with a limited number of dwelling units. So technically a mixed-use building is permitted in this zone, but with a limited amount of dwelling units. But under 05200, the commercial uses and multiple dwellings located above commercial uses are a permitted use to a maximum height of 22 meters. So the areas of discussion for today would be, does the proposal use materials that are consistent and compatible with the surrounding context? Does the proposal complement the existing massing patterns, rhythm, character, and the surrounding context? And does the proposal demonstrate sensitivity towards community identity through an understanding of the character of a place, context, and setting? And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're ready for the applicant to present the proposals. Please keep it to under 10 minutes. Thank you.
All right, I'll just share my screen here.
Jen,
Can everyone hear me?
Jen, would you stop sharing your screen?
Sorry,
So that Clayton can? Yeah, thank you. Clayton, you're good now.
All right. All right, thank you for having me. I'll be presenting 11 Robert Street. As mentioned, it's situated downtown in the heart of the Hamilton. It's right along James Street North. Notable buildings around the site is the Armory, of course. We also have the new Acclamation building To the south, we have Christchurch Cathedral that the building overlooks from the north end. We also have two 1960s, 70s tower blocks off to the east that kind of set a kind of a opposition to the greater context of this area, which is low rise to the east and mixed use to the west. In Massing, our building is situated in a somewhat unique situation. While it is noted to be urban infill, both sides of the site are bounded by easements. One is a laneway easement to the east, one is a shared easement to the west. I'll get in more into that and why it informed our context of our building. We spoke about the zoning. We've covered the district, I think, in a reasonable manner, so I won't focus too much on that. I'll get more to the nuts and bolts of the project. As we note, building, one notable condition to keep in mind when I speak about the western wall is this laneway right here is currently filled with restaurant uses, green bins, dumpsters, exits, where chefs go to smoke. In this laneway here, the second story is filled with HVAC units, kitchen exhaust, some terraces. The third floor is set back even as farther set back in most cases with units and terraces, but there are items like wood fire chimneys here, and there's another one mid-block, keep in mind. This laneway to the east is the shared laneway to provide access around the site, which is predominantly parking lot behind the building. That's a shared easement with other buildings, not our building. We don't have easement rights to the rear of the lot, just an shared easement to the west and east. Contextually for height, our building, we're attempting to keep it respecting the zoning height, just to kind of give you an idea in the region. It's predominantly in the 3-story range with a mixed bag of 8 and 18-story tower blocks. I'll speak more to this as we go along. Massing-wise, the site took on the idea that this is a mid-block development that in the future could potentially be bounded by greater density. When developing it, we chose that this laneway had incompatible uses to focus any glazing or balconies of this side of the building. There's overlook concerns with existing terraces, there's all the mechanical units, and then this is an active restaurant laneway for deliveries, grease, interceptor draining, items like that. There's also a condition that there's many structures within this laneway that the restaurants use, and it's not very accessible for vehicles at many times when there's bins in the alleyway. So we chose to treat this as a future infill condition, but we did not want to subject it to a totally blank wall condition. For that, we started to explore the idea of treating these as decorative facades with a focus on texture and color as a sort of backdrop to the uses that are happening there. As we proceeded along, we decided to focus the vertical access of the building through the elevator core and stair core along the western side. This vertical element would provide access to a rooftop patio and subject itself to being about as tall as the armory's turret. For that, we decided this element would become an important feature of the building and an element that could be seen from James Street and a focus of interest. As we pushed and pulled the facade to provide balcony spaces for the units, we started to provide channels within the western facade for light well for bedrooms and to provide lighting to the central corridor. We then began to focus on the other side, balcony recesses. That'll be the next one, yes. Private amenity of the units are focused around the north, south, and east sides of the building. This is where predominantly the units are orientated to. There's a proposed rooftop terrace, a commercial use exterior terrace, which our client has signaled that they would like a restaurant at this base, so we can provide seating. And then we move the private entrances and public entrances are right off Robert Street. Exits are through the rear and through the lobby of the building. Obviously, we needed to screen mechanical. Mechanical is focused to the rear of the building to be out of view from the street and to provide pleasant space for the terrace. Moving along with the fabric of the site, the armory contains strong vertical elements, along with strong horizontal elements with through using brickwork and granite. The vertical elements are the buttresses of the building. The horizontal are the bandings of granite and brickwork. We're also tying in the horizontals of the adjacent site through their floor heights separation. By doing so, our base condition, while is modified to take on this rhythmic approach, while also providing materials that are sympathetic to the materials of the existing area. This brings the idea the sun is focused on east-west, east and south lighting. West, the strong trajectory of the south, western sunlight is obscured to the opaque walls, but is let in through a light well on this side. All right, go down to the next. We'll get to the next. So this is looking west towards James Street here. We have the armory with its banding of granite and brick with its verticals of the buttresses. Our building here taking on this strong textured appearance. This would be a granite panel material that is both cut in triangles and then scored to provide a textured appearance. Does that make sense? So these are the verticalities that we're drawing through of the armory. While the material palette isn't a direct copy of the area, we are taking on the idea that when many of these buildings in the context were constructed in around the 1900s, they were done in a high quality, rich material palette. And we were desired to continue on this high quality material palette, but in showcase contemporary methods. Materials of 1910 were prominent for 1910, and we feel materials for the 21st century should be showcased, but still remain in the realm of tried and tested. So the predominantly flat surfaces of the building are granite panels. The verticalities along here are brick. The balconies are colored mesh material, and there's floor to ceiling continuous glazing where we want light to illuminate the suites. From James Street, we're proposing this textured material to be the focal point, because the understanding is while this is bounded by two easements, in the future, the idea of this downtown region is that buildings could be butted up right against the building. So for the time when this building is exposed, our idea is to provide a rich palette to interest the eye, but while also keeping in mind incompatible uses that are current and may change in the future. This element here is the elevator tower. It would be clad in a reflective textured metal. The idea is that it will glint in the sunlight as the sun comes around, not only providing visual interest for the suites, but also provide visual interest from James Street. The rear of the site, it's bounded by a laneway to the east and a parking easement to the north. We're providing more glazing to the north to capture that northern daylight. The eastern side is roughly about 50% glazed from the second story up. The base is predominantly brick around the rear to take note that this is a largely service area behind the building. Vehicles accessing the parking area access through this laneway, and then you have all the restaurant uses to the west. Basement is simple. The long-term storage bicycle, the roof terrace is provided with large overhangs to block overlook. So the idea is that any roof uses will block any people's view down to the existing low rise. Same with the planters on the other side. And to the south, mechanical screening to the north. Streetwise, as you can see right here, with the bounding of the site, it's a very tight site. It's treated as an infill building with the focus to the north and south. The easement is shared on the east, so we're able to provide more glazing on this side of the building. All the units are oriented appropriately to the direction of the glazing. It can be found in any typical condo layout. Light well feeding into the corridor and additional bedroom suite of that unit. The sixth floor is just predominantly larger suites, 2-bedroom. And the ground floor condition is a large commercial space forecasted to be restaurant with commercial garbage and residential garbage to the rear that would be brought around this shared right away. Lobby entrance off of Robert Street. Note the skylight above that will continue the appearance of the tower. Yeah, I might as well stop at this unless we want to talk more about the palette, or I can bring up your questions now.
I think the panel will have some questions for you for clarity, and then we can keep moving forward.
Okay.
So if we could now move to question and answers, and perhaps we could start with Yasin.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. Thank you very much for the presentation. It looks like a nice package. I'm intrigued by the scheme, but I have just a few questions. So first of all, there's no parking, is that correct?
Correct.
And then I see in your section you show amenity space and bike storage below grade?
Yes, long-term bike storage below grade.
Okay, what is the access to that? Off from the elevator, or is there a stair, or?
There'll be an elevator access.
Okay. So I noticed that the elevator is quite large. What was your thinking about that? Are there different? Are you?
The elevator
in terms of use, yeah.
It is a single elevator for the whole building. It is also to facilitate moving into the building and to meet the code requirements for stretcher and firefighting.
Okay.
And
okay.
Typically, if you have 2 elevators, one would be smaller, but this one has to pull double duty.
Okay. And I guess you're using the same elevator to move equipment up and down if needed? Because you've got some equipment up on the roof, right?
Yes. So any maintenance on the roof will be provided by this elevator.
Okay. And then the loading, is there a loading bay at the back? Because on the ground plan, I see you have commercial, and then there's a slightly different color tone at the back.
There is about a 3 or 4 meter setback to the property line at the back that can be used for loading. It hasn't been designated.
Okay, so is it commercial right to that back wall then, or I just noticed that there's a color tone difference there. Is there a different use?
It's commercial garbage and refuse, so they'll have their own contained garbage versus the residential that will have its own contained garbage.
Okay, I'm meaning on the I'm asking about the color tone difference on the west side of the corridor.
Oh, I think that's just. I think that
it's just a graphic thing. Yeah, it's a mistake.
That's the outline of the existing building underneath.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I kind of have this shape is the existing footprint. Yeah.
So just to repeat, you're saying that there is potentially 3 to 4 meters to park a service vehicle at the back and unload?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then just another question on the west wall, or on the walls that you, there are bedrooms on those sides, and I'm just wondering why you opted not to have windows on those facades, because you and trees.
Yeah, generally speaking,
I understand the reasoning that there are style perimeter on the lower level, but up above, you could have windows, right?
We could. It's not. It's something. The more windows you start adding to a bedroom, the less area you have places to place items in your bedroom, and these follow typical condo layouts right now. And it's really only this unit to the south, and this unit here has kitchen for half of it, and this also has kitchen for half of it. So we balanced the units that they really didn't require. The layout's no different than these units that have daylighting just on one side.
Okay. I will. I have some other questions about just materials, but I'll leave it at that. So, just one more thing. Just when you did explain a little bit about your strategy on when you were talking about the massing and the way you were placing the decorative facades as a way of responding to context. So, other than the immediate kind of ways, is there knowledge or understanding that block chain, because built up area is very close to you building, and was there some block these facades? Like why you have a west facade that's very solid and the east facade that's trying to respond open and trying to respond to something? Did you think that the residents would stay longer and so you would get more views that way, or?
One understanding is it's a right of way to the east, so it will always be a laneway versus the other side, which is a shared easement.
Okay.
That was one thinking. The other thinking is we rather eastern daylighting than western daylighting to the building, and also the idea that it is bookending a possible future developments.
Okay.
And also the other idea that if any land is given away in the future, that it would be the eastern easement versus the western.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, the western easement given up versus the eastern.
Yeah. Yeah. And was there any thinking around future limiting distance conditions on that side as well?
It is slightly narrower on the western one. So the idea was to treat it that something could bookend up against it.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Tim, could we have your comments or questions? Tim?
Sorry, just was muted there. Thanks, Vince. Just one question, kind of a detailed one. What's the floor to ceiling height of the ground floor?
Floor to the underside of first floor is about 4 meters, I believe.
Oh, just 4 meters?
Yeah.
Okay, looks like more than that, but okay. What is the thought about signage for the restaurant?
The idea would be, and let me pull this down. The idea would be future integrated over the brick banding to allow for either a signboard, or if they wanted a iconographic signage along there, that it could be adapted to their needs. So it wasn't straight, here's your signboard, this is where your sign will always go. It's kind of more freely up to how the tenant envisions their future space.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Sorry, Vince, I had you muted. If you want to just repeat that.
Beg your pardon? Is Jackie there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for your presentation. I find the building very attractive. My only question, because I'm not used to seeing this quality of materials on buildings that are actually larger than this. Has it been run through the whole cost analysis, and is it a known thing that this size building can afford these materials?
It's a higher quality rain screen system, so it's not going to be cheap like EFIS, but the client does know that it is a premium product, and they've asked that the building be presented with high quality materials. They want this to be a showpiece building for their development. They are going to retain it. It's not going to be condo, it's going to be apartment. So they want this to be a long-lasting feature. We are currently putting the same material on a building in Hamilton right now, the Lister block, and it's it's competitive to similar panelized materials.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, we're looking for Robert. Robert?
Yeah, just unmuting. Hi, thanks for the presentation. Quick question with respect to the laneway and the easement, and also setbacks. It was tough to tell from your drawings. Compliments on the package. I thought the package was nicely put together. But one thing I found difficult to assess from the plan drawings was the width of the easement and the laneway, and the extent of the side and rear setbacks. So if you could.
Yes, if I can actually show a site plan that we've moved forward that will give you just with a proper survey to the background. Just bring that up and give you an idea of these existing laneways. So the western one is 3 meters to our property line. We've set back the building 600 millimeters. The eastern side is 3.45, and we've set the building back 550 millimeters. The rear is actually 2.7 to part of the building, and then you have the recessed balconies. There was a desire to have ample patio space below. So you have a 4-meter setback to the property line at the front to provide patio space.
And what about the central portion on the east side? The non-blank wall portion?
Non-blank wall, it is, I noted it, it's roughly in line about 550 millimeters back, but the balconies are farther back than this.
Further projecting.
Yeah, no, the balconies don't project. They are recessed into the building. So if I move up here, here, yeah, so the balconies, this line right here is your 550 millimeter setback, and then the balconies are set back from that line. So this facade is probably about 750 millimeters from the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Yuna.
Thank you for your presentation. Clayton, can you take us a little bit more through the description of your design and thought process as far as your elevation massing strategy and you know your rationale behind the more, I guess, is postmodern architectural style versus the myriad of all other styles that surround the site. How you arrived to that specific visual.
There was a desire by the client to present something that was contemporary. He did not want to create faux heritage for the site. That was important to him. He does work in adaptive reuse, and he loves heritage, but his desire for this building to be ground up new, he wanted the appearance to be contemporary with what a lot of times what clients are, the tenants and that are expecting nowadays, just with other places, but also to kind of represent a shift in the downtown, that he's not bringing just contemporized heritage, if you will, to the area. But there was a desire to reflect the heights and scales of the immediate lower context, but acknowledge the fact that the building is going to be taller than the adjacent context. So that was largely why the base 2-story is compressed and all the verticalities are kept consistent with what is seen at the base condition, while this new upper part that pops above it is presented in a new language that will be that is occurring in the area, but still very new.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you take the chair. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. The building on the corner, James.
Yes.
What height can it go to in the future? Like, what is it governed by your same height as yours, or is it?
I believe it's the same zoning, so it's 22 meters, 6 stories.
22. Okay. So in other words, it would roughly be the same height as your building then, right?
Yes.
So the sunlight from the west wouldn't necessarily be blocked by that building. I mean, obviously at the end of the day it would, but
Yeah.
and generally mid-afternoon light would still penetrate.
Yes, and that's why we have the.
Just trying to get at, because some of the suites, I mean, you can always get some windows, and I sense you didn't really want to perforate your large panel with a window opening or something that might be driving it architecturally. And I'm just wondering, is that the case?
Partly that. There's also just straight inherent cost with punching windows into a facade with limited distancing. Would probably have to sprinkler these windows. They'd be costly small windows that I don't think would advance the design.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Now, the neighborhood's predominantly brick.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if the building next door was, well, there's two things, I guess, since my thoughts. Did you look at using brick?
Well, the base condition is all brick. The initial 2 stories is brick. I can show it.
Yeah, but
So yes, the initial 2 stories is brick. These walls are all brick, and it wraps around brick.
Okay, on the side elevation, though, that's probably more predominant in terms of what you read from the alleyways you're coming down the street is marble to the grade, right? To grade, right? Yeah.
So this up to the 2nd story. So this height datum is roughly kind of around the roof heights and 3rd floor height of the adjacent buildings. And this is predominantly brick with glazing recessed. The other side, this side, it's hard to read, but again, up to this height datum about here is brick along the building.
Okay. Last question. Your balconies on the east side, the limiting distance to the property line, you said you had 0.9 meters. Another
0.75 for the balconies, roughly, I think, or 0.6. Yeah.
What's the distance from the facade to the property line?
The facade gets as close as 0.55.
So in total, you've got roughly 1.2 meters, something like that.
Yeah. For the balconies are 1.8 meters deep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus the 0.55.
Plus the 0.55. Yeah.
Okay, so 2.3-ish. Okay. So you're allowed some percentage of permitted openings there. Okay. So I think now we'll move on to a question and answer session. To the panel advice. So we'll start with Yasin with some advice. Yasin, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was just muted there. I think overall package is interesting. Pretty, I think it's certainly different for the context. I think the massing is okay because I think I can see a gradual rise in the heights coming up. I think the issue I have I'm not reconciled with yet internally is that on the one hand I think compositionally I really like the building. It's interesting, the idea of the decorative planes and the sort of framing of the front facade, the way you're doing it, as well as the cornice on the top. I think it's really troubling to see these blank facades, though, and that's where I'm trying to see how the way it almost feels like the variation of materiality is kind of an excuse. It's a compensation for all of that, and so that's where I'm trying to see how my comments could guide you, because I don't see it's somehow be quite odd to have all these solid facades on both sides. So on the one hand, it's a very tight. Also, it looks like a floor plate that's quite dense, and I'm trying to see in your planning if anything could have been loosened up. It almost seems too aggressive in its the density of the planning inside, although it's well planned. And I don't know if that's where some of the things that you're confronting on the outside could have been loosened up, because if the units were, let's say, less rooms and had more, I'm trying to see how the other facades would have been alleviated by some of the planning density that you're proposing on the inside. Yeah, I would leave it at that. I think my main concern is just the blank facades, and that's why I was asking previously whether there was any way of seeing decorative panels with any kind of void conditions inside, like window, punch window condition, that would help create a decorative pattern of sorts. Because there's just a lot of feels like there's a lot of decoration on it through all the materials. And some of it looks overly fussy and not necessary for a building of this scale. But that is also a client decision I'm sure you're confronting. But it just seems like the neighbor will suffer by seeing these blank facades. So, and I don't know if a granite wall is enough, right? A decorative granite wall. So that's where my main concern is on the outside. Having said that, again, I repeat, I like it compositionally. I think it's interesting, but it is kind of a challenging thing to see in the neighborhood. Like it'll remain blank for quite a while before you see the rest of the context coming up. So,
Okay,
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Is Tim there?
I am. Yeah, thanks, Vince.
Great.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Clayton. It is an impressive package, and it is a handsome building overall. I agree with Yasin that this is, you've done some really nice things in terms of articulation. Certainly a contemporary approach is perfectly fine here, I think. That being said, there really isn't much attempt here to reflect or to relate to the historic context. And I appreciate the efforts around the vertical elements or horizontal elements, but that's very subtle stuff that maybe an architect will notice. To me, I think it's about materiality, and I appreciate the first two stories do have brick. I think it simply maybe needs to be red brick. That might be as simple as that. I know it affects the color scheme for the whole building, of course, but there's just, to me, in terms of materiality, if we're going to accept this as a contemporary building, I think it's through the materiality that there needs to be a little better relationship to the heritage. So I leave that with you to think about. But this is really contrasting too much for me.
Just one thing to keep in mind is one building is pink with red terracotta.
I appreciate, of course, this James Street North is a little bit eclectic, but if you just sort of look overall at the heritage, this is an area of a lot of red brick buildings. Sure, some brown brick buildings as well. I'm just looking, that pink building is hopefully not always going to be pink, and maybe there'll be another building there someday. It's just, I think, and you think of the Armory too across the road. That's quite significant. So I think there's just a little bit more of a gesture there that needs to be made to correspond to that, while keeping the articulation and overall design that you've got here, because it is quite nice. I have the same concerns about the blank wall. I appreciate why you've done this. Yes, there could be another 6-story building, very maybe likely will be a 6-story building one day. But I think it's reasonable to think there will always be a separation between the two buildings. And I mean, if I'm in a building in a bedroom on the 3rd or 4th floor, I would rather have sunlight coming in from that side rather than the light well. And it's just setting aside what the occupants might want. From an urban design standpoint, we have to accept that even if we're not always going to see all this blank wall, we're going to see a chunk of it. And so I think if some effort could be made for maybe the first third that wall from the street, having some kind of window treatment, and even kind of false windows would be better than I think what you've got here. Maybe the balconies you've got there in the corner could wrap around a little bit. It's just a little too blank for me, and I think I appreciate the high quality materials. I'm not sure they're necessarily the materials you need for this area, but nevertheless, I certainly applaud you for going to that level of quality. Again, I just think there needs to be a little bit more fenestration on that one side. That's it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie.
Yeah, as a landscape architect, my only comment is to watch the planters on the rooftop, that they're not climbable. So either they're high enough or pulled away from the edge so people can't jump over. So
Yeah.
that's one thing to just keep an eye on. That's it.
Thank you. Robert.
Thanks. And thanks again for the presentation and the package materials, very high quality. I'll try and keep it brief because I think my comments are really going to echo what has already been said. Start with the setbacks and the blank walls. I completely agree with the comments that have been made so far. I know in the presentation you went to great lengths to explain that, well, maybe in the future those easements will go away and buildings might butt right up against this building. On the west, given that it's the rear of the buildings that are on North James, I think the chances of a building butting up, right up against that western facade are probably not great, and that any new building that would go in there would be required to have a generous rear setback that I think would allow for windows on the western facade. On the east, you described a little bit about the openings, the window openings that are facing east are not really set back right now. So obviously that would be problematic if a building in the future were to butt up against that facade. So, my sense is that given that you have those existing easements on both sides, I would just take advantage of that and assume that those easements will be there in the future and put the windows in. And I agree also from the inside out perspective, the units would benefit from having additional windows, despite the fact that maybe a typical condo unit layout now just has the windows on the one wall. Certainly, in my experience, corner units that have glazing on two walls, are seen as more premium, desirable units than the ones that just have the openings on the one end. So again, I highly support the idea of not having the blank walls and of putting windows in there. With respect to materials and relating to the context, I also agree. There's, I think the efforts that you've gone to so far. I mean, it's a very carefully thought out building, both in terms of its planning and the facades and materials. But I do think you could give more of a nod to the heritage and the red brick in the area. So I agree with Tim that changing the color of the brick material that you've used may help to do that. The other thing is and I don't know if this was an effort to stay within the height limit, but the ground floor for commercial use at 4 meters is probably not quite tall enough. You might consider increasing that. And I think that's it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, Robert. Thanks. Okay, Robert, just take a chair a sec.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments. The building sprinklers. So placing, I know deluge sprinklers on the western facade wouldn't be such a big effort because you've already got a sprinkler system in the building to begin with. I mean, in a lot of cases where you didn't in the past, you had to go through those efforts to be able to add fenestration with a deluge system. So in this case, I don't see it being such a huge. I mean, there's 4 floors of, I think, smaller units, and those smaller units are the ones that need the daylight, open up the space, And in some cases, you have bedrooms on the interior wall versus bedrooms on the outside wall, and vice versa. So I think, you know, popping in a strip window or a punch window or something in that panel would help the unit to open it up. I'm still in the camp where I think some genuflection to the masonry building across the street is worthwhile looking at. I fully understand your philosophy of the building material selection, but I think the neighborhood has spoken to a masonry history and the history of the use of masonry, and particularly in Hamilton, where they had their own masonry production, has some merit. And I think maybe when you begin to cost out the building, you may find that the use of masonry may be a little more cost effective, or at least some way you can introduce some kind of a panel closer to the street front that does speak to that in some way. So that's it for our comments. If you would like us to repeat...
Sorry, Vince. We missed Ute.
I'm sorry, did I miss Utah? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
could have a Don't worry.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
I think I did that once before, didn't I?
That's okay.
In any event, please jump in. I overlooked you. Sorry.
No, don't worry. Clayton, I think I'm not going to comment on the blank walls and the materiality of it, because I think everybody pretty much covered that, and I second that sentiment. The only thing that I guess I can offer that maybe of interest and maybe you already explored is the use of that interesting, well, right now it's currently just a parking lot, but that interstitial space between the back of your building and the back of other buildings eventually could become a quite interesting courtyard of some sort with other uses. So I don't know if there has been any further discussion with the city on how, and based on property boundaries and the future of the area, but on how this specific kind of internal courtyard could evolve into the future, in which case, I don't know what's the case, if it's to develop into something that's really kind of more of a pedestrian geared environment, the back of your building can open to a whole other set of considerations. But I leave you with that. It's just that internal space could be something really, really interesting.
Yeah.
That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. And so I think if I was just trying to keep within the 1 hour here. If you would like us to repeat any of these comments, we're glad to do that. If you're confident that you've heard everyone and have taken some direction from that, that would be great. If you have any additional questions, please let us voice them now.
I think I received most of the comments from people. I understand where they're all headed.
Okay. So we're good. Okay, great presentation, great package. Thanks for coming out. Okay.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.